On the flight deck, listeners are manning up for the podcast launch. It's time for all unnecessary shows to clear the airwaves.
You're listening to the Hangar Bay, a podcast dedicated to the latest military flight simulation and hardware news. From developers to the community and everything in between, the Hangar Bay will get you squared away.
Welcome down to the Hangar Bay, your source for the latest news that every military flight simulation pilot can use for the week of February 17th, 2024. I'm your host, Stu Manji, and I'm happy you could join us for another episode of the Hangar Bay. Hopefully it was a good week for you in the virtual skies. It's a pretty exciting week for me. I finally got back into some aircraft that I've been meaning to check out for a while, specifically the DCS-FA-18C, and man, has that aircraft improved over the last few months. It maybe has even been longer than that since I flew that aircraft, and just jumping back in with some friends. We did a We Run Liberation mission the other night with that great crew over there, and it's pretty incredible to see how much content they've added to it, how capable that aircraft feels, which, you know, makes sense given it's a multi-role fighter. But, you know, that's one of the fun things, I guess, and frustrating things about that game, right? You step away from certain aircraft for a while and you come back and it feels completely different. Almost feels like you have to completely relearn it again, but that's also the exciting aspect as well, right? See what new stuff awaits you and what new things you need to learn. Anyway, enough of that. We'll talk about some more news-related content because that's what we're here to do. So let's get things started like we always do each and every week with the flyby. And the flyby is where we aim to cover the highlights from this week's news in 60 seconds or less. Starting things off this week, we have the IL-2 developers who discussed updates to their World War I series flying Circus in their weekly developer diary, including details regarding the career mode being added to the game in the next patch. Ugra Media released 3 new videos on their YouTube channel showing off new air bases coming to their DCS maps for Normandy 2 and the Syria map. Heatblur put the hype train into motion this week with the release of their first in a series of videos detailing what we can expect from the upcoming F4E module coming to DCS later this year. On the hardware side, AuthentiKit announced a winter promotion for their P51 throttle kit. It's a DIY project we'll talk a little bit about later, but the short news is you can save about $30 to $40 if you're looking to pick that up right now. MATRIC, MATRIC, is a virtual button box for iPads and Androids. They added DCS and BIOS support for their app earlier this week. And then finally, Techneatium, a user on the Hoggit Reddit server, or board I should say, released a fantastic new F-16 air-to-air guide for the community, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the community section. So let's shift things over again to the news focus and start with the developer content this week.
Hey everyone, Wags here.
In the developer news segment, we bring you the latest happenings from game developers and related third parties. And as we started in the flyby, let's go ahead and start with the older stuff first, highlighting the World War I side of the aviation flight sim spectrum with IL-2 news. So as I've mentioned, the developer diary this week focused on the Flying Circus series of the IL-2 Great Battle series, specifically regarding some content that we can expect in the next 5.101 update. They announced that the team has beta tested that starting today, the upcoming features in the patch, and they also mentioned that Ugra Media is fine-tuning and debugging the map with the completion date scheduled for the end of the month. So potentially sounds like we might see that patch if everything stays on cycle, or schedule I should say, maybe end of February or early March. They went on to add that negotiations are ongoing with the Ugra team to continue the Flying Circus series with the goal of, quote, reproducing the full aircraft set and the Rise of Flight map in the modern engine. So for fans of the World War I series, that could be very exciting news indeed. So stay tuned to see what they have to say in the upcoming weeks and months. But the highlight for me, what I was most interested in as someone who's kind of been on the sidelines with the series, I'll be honest, the World War I flight sim scene isn't really my cup of tea, but what could drag me back in is what they talked about in detail this week, which was the new career mode. So essentially it sounds like they're going to bring over, or should I say port a lot of the existing functionality they have in the World War II side of the house over to the World War I side with the Flying Circus series. They went on to discuss, in particular, the 2 phases of the campaign that are going to be introduced to the game. The first will be from April 1st to September 30th, 1917. In the other campaign window you'll have to play, it's from April 1st to November 11th, 1918. They go on to say that there'll be over 105 different airfields to fly from, a total of 42 total squadrons. So quick rundown, that's 9 French, 15 British, 6 American, and 12 German, and then finally 17 types of missions. Now, they did go on to say that they want to add some Great War specific missions to the mission set. Specifically, what they mean by that is mission types that are unique to this World War I setting, specifically a balloon hunt set of missions, photo recon, artillery fire adjustment, and visual recon type missions. So it all sounds pretty exciting, lots of good content coming their way. They also included a wide variety of screenshots showing what that career map looks like in-game and all the various UI elements. Currently looking through them here on the show notes, and as a quick reminder, you can always find the show notes on the hangarbaypod.com. I always include the show notes I follow along on the blog there for you to check out. You can also find these on the video version of the podcast that's available on Spotify or over on my YouTube page. That's at Stewmanji, STEWMANJI. Always follow along if you want with the video podcast, or go refer back to the show notes at a later time if you're interested in seeing any of this content. Everything we discussed is linked over there. So anyway, that wraps things up for the IL-2 side of the house. Looks like some really great content. Are there many of you interested in the Flying Circus series? Are you interested in World War I aviation in general? Let me know. It's an aspect of the aviation world that I really haven't spent a lot of time in, but as I mentioned earlier, this is something that potentially could drag me in and get me interested. Okay, moving forward in the timeline, we'll get closer to the modern day and talk a little bit about a small game that I don't think I've mentioned yet on the show, and that's Tiny Combat Arena. So if you haven't heard of this, this is a game that's on Steam. It's in early access. It's what I would describe as a sim-light type of game. It's available there for $20 US right now. And if you haven't heard of it before, the developer describes it as, aptly stated, a labor of love combat flight simulator that aims to strike the perfect balance between a simulator and an approachable, customizable air combat experience, all executed in a stylized look representing a fictional Cold War era conflict. All that to say, I would describe it, as I've often described other games that are kind of going for this sim-light vibe, as think old school US Navy fighters, Jane series level of difficulty and content. So, the goal is to get you in the aircraft pretty quick without it being incredibly difficult to master, but yet still having a fairly simulated environment that's somewhat realistic. So it does have, I wouldn't describe it as pixelated graphics, but it's not nearly photorealistic in terms of what a DCS or IL-2 is going for. It currently only supports one map and one flyable plane, the Harrier, AV-8B, and it does have a series of arena-like quick mission builder scenarios. I've enjoyed my time with it. It does support HOTAS setup, so if you got your current setup you're using for DCS, IL-2, whatever flight simulator you like to fly, it'll work for Tiny Combat Arena. The news specifically this week is that they're looking to add official TrackIR support. The developer mentions that they've currently been using a 10-year-old version of a plugin that shows the game as a Unity game. It says the new approach is going to be much more modern, cleaner, and official, and it'll be way easier to set up. So as someone who likes to jump in when I kind of want a palate cleanser, I think games like this are perfect. Like we talked about Nuclear Option last week, Tiny Combat Arena, in my mind, feels that niche, if you will, of something, just want to jump in, have some fun without being overwhelmed by difficulty. So TrackIR support coming their way. It's fun to see all the updates that continue with this game. If you haven't checked it out, the developer for it is Y485. So WHY485. You can follow him on Twitter. Great follow, keeps you up to date on what's going on with the game. All right, staying in the modern realm, let's shift over to DCS. The newsletter for this week, for 16th February, was fairly light. Some of the major content we had this week was, if you hadn't already heard, we mentioned the Lunar sale was going on last week. Well, earlier this week, there was a database maintenance error that brought the website down, caused some multiplayer connectivity issues. As a reward, I guess, for persevering through that day of pain, Eagle Dynamics has extended the Lunar sale. So if you wanted to pick something up and you thought you'd missed the window, fear not. The sale is continuing through the 25th of February on the eShop. I believe the sale just ended on Steam, but if you're still interested in you purchase all your modules and campaigns and maps through DCS's official store, well, you're in luck. Got another week to go. I have not personally picked anything up. Still on the fence about a couple things. I think I've mentioned before, I'm kind of eyeing still the South Atlantic map. Still got my eyes on the F1 Mirage, maybe the Hind, and then a couple campaigns. But I don't know. I got a lot of Hangar Queens as it is already, so maybe we'll be strong and wait for a summer sale or something like that. On the news front, continuing though with some aircraft updates, they did have several updates concerning the FA-18C Hornet. Just going to touch on a handful here. If you want to see more, go check out the developer notes. The ones I thought were the standouts and most interesting were they mentioned they want to expand, the angle of attack maneuverability of the FA-18C up to about 50 to 55 degrees, vice the previous mid-30s. They say they want to highlight the outstanding low-speed, high AOA maneuverability of the F-18, so that could be interesting to see once it comes into play. They also mentioned updates to the flight control system that supposedly will improve landing controls in a crosswind environment. That brings me back to, as I mentioned, we were doing a We Run Liberation mission earlier this week, and I'm sure many of you who have been on a multiplayer server have encountered unexpected crosswinds on takeoff. DCS likes to default to some pretty harsh environmental conditions sometimes. So anything that can improve landing or takeoff in crosswind environments, I'm a big fan of. But specifically what this update is designed to counter is improved functionality when switching between the flap settings of auto, half, and full in improved aircraft handling and behavior. They also mentioned some updates to autopilot, ACLS behavior. So long story short, several more updates coming our way for F-18C. Maybe the aircraft will finally go out of early access later this year. I know that's a huge sticking point for a lot of people in the community, how long these aircraft stay in early access. That said, still seeing developments come our way for the F-18C Hornet years after release, so those are some exciting updates. However, what I found more exciting in the DCS world community was two of the updates we're getting to now. And the first one is from Ugra Media. They are the developers of Syria and the Normandy 2 maps. On their Flight School 9411 YouTube channel, which is the official channel of the DCS map developer for Ugra, they teased 3 new videos this week. So if you haven't checked out their YouTube channel before, they like to do a series of 2 to 3 minute videos where they quickly launch off of an airbase they're developing and then fly around it close to the field, give you a top-down perspective of all the things they're adding, zoom in on some key functionalities. Well, the first one up this week is, I'm going to butcher this name, but I want to say Muwafaq Salti Air Base, which is in northern Jordan. So if you're not familiar with this base, it's one of the main U.S. air hubs in the Middle East, even though it's not formally acknowledged. So what we're going to see here is a really well-developed airfield sitting in the northern Jordan region, which will have a really nice addition to the Syria map. Simcelo, a key map developer, a campaign developer in the community, already mentioned on Twitter that he's said his Operation Inherent Resolve missions will immediately take advantage of this new airfield when it comes our way. So it looks like we already have some in the community planning to add this to some of the great additions they already have to maps and missions in the area. So look forward to checking that out when it gets released. And for all of these maps, by the way, no timetable on when we'll actually see these released. These are just appear to be teasers, but generally speaking, once we see these videos go live, it's not too long before we see them in game. The next one on the Normandy 2 map, which if you're not into the World War II side of DCS, and I don't think many of you necessarily are, it's still a beautiful map to check out if you've never flown around it. Offers some great content, so it's really nice to see them continue to flesh this map out with the addition of some new airfields. Specifically, the first one is High Halden. This airfield is located in Kent, England, about 50 miles southeast of London. Now, per Wikipedia, some background on this airfield was that it was opened in early 1944 as an example of what an advanced landing ground airfield would look like in France after D-Day. So allowing some aviation units to train on a field that would be emblematic of what the Allies would see immediately after the landing and the breakout in D-Day. So field came into operation in early 1944, and it was actually closed already by September 1944. However, from the quick research I did, it did look like there were some P-47 units from the U.S. 358th Fighter Group that actually used this field while it was operational, and the video attached to it looks pretty robust and involved field. Mainly dirt airstrips is what we're looking at with this one. So if you took my advice and you're more of a modern flyer and you pick this up, maybe not as much use to you unless you want to do the World War II aircraft, but still looks really, really nice. And then the other airfield that's going to that showcased the development video was Dunkirk MATRIC. So this airfield will be over on the French side of the canal. This aircraft, or I should say airfield, was originally used in the summer of 1940 by RAF Hurricanes and French Air Forces defending the Dunkirk evacuation. Has a very small hard concrete strip, but then it has some larger grass fields at the end of it. And it looks like Hard to tell from this video because they don't really go into detail about what additions are actually being made, but from a visual standpoint, it does appear that the grass fields at the outset or extending past the concrete strip have been added to the field. So it looks like we have the combination of grass strip, hard strip, runway. So that could be exciting for someone looking for an airfield in and around the Dunkirk area if you want to flesh out some scenarios there. So in summary, 2 airfields coming to Normandy 2, 1 coming to the Syria map. Looks like some great stuff. And finally, I'm probably saving the best for last, at least in my opinion, it's news from Heatblur. Yep, the Heatblur hype train is in full speed, and that begins with us this week because of the release of the F4E Phantom Episode 1, the first in a series of episodes Heatblur is promising to send our way to give us a better overview of all the features and technology that we're going to receive in the DCS F4E Phantom that's going to be releasing sometime this year. So we've already touched on this aircraft in a variety of episodes so far throughout the course of the show, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. But if you haven't checked out this video, I've got it linked in the show notes. It's really, really good. The content is very strong. Heatblur is really pulling out all the tricks this year to get us excited and really showcasing some really cool technology. Some of which we've already talked about, the in-game manual, Gesture 2.0, the crew chief, that's all good. What stood out to me in this episode, and it's only about 7 minutes long, so they get you in and out pretty quick, was the highlighting of next generation components. So they're really highlighting the simulation system that they're leveraging for this aircraft, and it appears to be all the aircraft they want to develop moving forward. And when I say next generation component simulation system, what I mean is they've modeled everything in the aircraft. They mentioned to the filament of the lamps, to the needle of the altimeter. Yeah, that's right. You can actually see it move and lag now based on the forces being subjected to the aircraft. What this all means is they state that every component on that aircraft can individually fail and or be influenced by other components. So, the sky's the limit on what impacts that could actually have on the aircraft, like from realistic damage modeling to subsequent failures. If one system fails, how does that impact another? I mean, given my past aviation experience, I don't want this to mean I take off and all of a sudden I have like a random lamp failure and instrument failure and that cancels my flight. So hopefully we won't go to that side. I know some people really probably want that level of fidelity. I don't need random system failures in my life on a Friday night after work, but that's just me. That said, I do like some cool damage modeling. So either way, lots of very, very cool functionality at play. Heatblur really put a lot of time and effort into this, and it's just really exciting to see how far forward they're pushing the DCS simulation engine with what they want to do with the F4E and some of their aircraft moving forward. Yeah, very exciting. Other things they tease and go on to say, we probably have already known, but it's just nice to hear reiterated. One thing that's interesting to me is they continue to highlight the challenge that this aircraft is going to offer from the crew. Multiple times now throughout their content and interviews, they've stated how if you really want to master this aircraft, it's going to set you apart from someone who only spends a few hours in the aircraft. And I suppose that's probably not a very bold statement given the level of detail in DCS, right? If you don't put in time in an aircraft, clearly you're not going to be able as good as it is someone who spends hundreds of hours. But it sounds like what they're referring to with this aircraft in particular is just how the capability of this aircraft is going to be directly related to how one masters the system. And you could go from a novice who maybe is barely combat effective to, if you really put the time and effort in this aircraft, you can be quite dangerous, quite capable. So I'm just curious to see how that plays out when we get in the aircraft and people start spending more time in there, how that really unfolds. But it sounds like if you're willing to pour yourself into this aircraft and put the time in, it's going to be a very, very rewarding experience, which probably in line with what we saw the F-14 to a large degree. So that's great. They also mentioned that multi-crew availability will be available on day one. So if you're like me, I like to fly in the back seat. It offers just a very new and different experience. So that's exciting for me and my friends. Looking forward to jumping in the Wizzo seat. The best part about all of this, though, is they tease some future upcoming episodes, specifically mentioning there'll be future episodes about the flight model, the weapons on the aircraft that we'll be able to utilize, the APQ-120 radar, the Gesture AI, crew chief, and more. So I would say based on the rate that these videos are released, we'll maybe start to be able to accurately predict a timeline of when we can expect the release date for the Phantom. Definitely feels like it's coming early this year, first half of this year. We're still speculating, but what do you think? Do you have any guesses on when this is going to release? I'm thinking May. I have no idea. That's not founded in any underlying knowledge, but if I had to throw a dart out there and see what sticks, I'm going to guess May. So hopefully we'll see more of these videos come, maybe bi-weekly and right up until the release of the aircraft. All right, so a lot of developer news this week. We went pretty developer heavy, but lots of good content coming our way. So let's just shift things over to the hardware side of the house.
Flight controls. Flight controls.
If you can move it, toggle it, push it, or rotate it, hardware news is where we're going to talk about it. And this week, the main portion of the hardware news is going to be dedicated to someone called AuthentiKit. So I mentioned this in the flyby. AuthentiKit is offering a P51D winter promotion. And before we get into the promotion, I want to provide a little background on AuthentiKit if you're not familiar with who they are or what they're really bringing to the table. So the website is AuthentiKit.org. That's AuthentiKit, AuthentiKit.org. Again, the link is on the show notes if you want to do it, reference it there. Essentially, what they are is a freeware open source community dedicated to developing self-built kits. Their whole mantra is, I want to develop a low-cost way for people to order parts on Amazon or eBay, combine that with 3D printed parts, and then some really well-detailed assembly guides and part lists. Boom, you can assemble a variety of World War II aircraft flight controls. And when I say a variety, they have a pretty large spectrum of products currently available. They have flight grips, throttles, to trim wheels and flap levers available for everything from the Spitfire to the P-51 Mustang to the Mosquito to the Tomahawk, the P-40, and the BF-109 and more. They have a lot more aircraft planned. And as I mentioned, all of this is free. So if you're just looking to get started, you want to go down and you have your own 3D printer, maybe some of your own hardware already in-house, go check these guys out. You could be downloading and printing your own P-51 setup today. But if you're not quite that handy, don't worry, because that's what the AuthentiKit is designed for. So they also have ready-to-go kits that are available for self-assembly. So, and they stress these are not DIY projects that require you to cut, drill, solder. I mean, all of these kits are designed to only need a screwdriver and a pair of scissors. So if you can put together Lego sets or a model airplane, well, maybe we won't go that far because I struggle with that still, even though I love Legos. But I digress. But if you don't feel like you're a technical person, that's okay. AuthentiKit is still designed for you. As they highlight, these are projects meant for a kitchen table and not a workshop. So, overall, what they offer, in addition to plans and assembly kits, is they also offer pre-packaged experiences, so ready-to-go kits. So maybe you're really interested in the Spitfire throttle, but you don't want to go to Amazon and have to deal with a part list. That's okay. You can also head over to simkitsupplies.com, and their goal is to provide you exactly what you need to exactly the right specification in one easy kit. So, you purchase your kit, it gets shipped to you, boom, you open it, all the parts are there, organized with everything you need to get started building. So that's a little bit of background. If you haven't checked it out, you're really interested in the World War II scene, go give it a look. It's very, very cool. The way they've designed all these kits to be interoperable with each other. They're designed to take advantage of Ethernet cords so that you can plug and play. If you want to swap between aircraft and you want to build multiple kits, perfect. They can handle that. And it's all designed to work around a very easy to operate base mount system that allows you to clamp it on, clamp it off. So if you're working at a desk, you don't really have a dedicated Simpit, this will still work for you. All right, specifically regarding the promotion itself, I feel like I've gone on about enough about how cool this stuff is, but it really, really is. So I really do encourage you to check it out. The promotion itself is regarding the P-51 throttle. So the organizers over there at the AuthentiKit community reached out, got some hardware manufacturers and suppliers to go along with discounting fully assembled kits for those of you looking to pick up the P-51 throttle. The sale will extend until the last day of the winter, so the first day of spring in March 21st, 2024. So all told, you're probably going to save about $30 to $40. So for the cost, $250, if you want a fully accurate P-51 throttle, you'll get all the parts, all the 3D printed things you'll need to fully assemble that and get it up running in no time. And finally, I've included a really cool video from Overkill Simulations. If you're not familiar with him, he makes some really good flight simulation content over on YouTube. He's got a great video detailing exactly what this P-51 kit looks like, walking through the assembly and how you can use it in game and what his experience is with that. Also got a link to the AuthentiKit YouTube page and their Twitter page. And again, I can't recommend them enough. I'm looking forward to developing or printing myself their P51 setup. I got my own 3D printers and a lot of hardware already. So I think a lot of this stuff I can just get started working on. And it looks like a really, really cool time. So shifting over to some other hardware news. I wouldn't say this is from a developer necessarily, but just my own personal hardware news. I did want to let you all know that I've been experimenting with VKB's lineup of GNX accessories this week. So didn't purchase them from Heatblur directly. I found someone nice on eBay that was selling some old equipment they didn't want anymore. But because of that, I got every one of the GNX modules. So I do have the FSMGA. So if you're not familiar with these are some small pieces of equipment from VKB that almost small, like little mini button boxes, if you will. So the first one is the front switch module. It's more aimed at your general aviation space. So if you're a Microsoft Flight Simulator type fan, it provides you with a lot of buttons, two encoders, a couple of encoders, and then that is mounted along with a couple throttle quadrants, as well as a side extension module. So this provides me with a flap lever, a landing gear lever, more buttons, more switches, more axes. And then finally on top of that, I added the World War II GNX script. So thinking about putting together a video of that in the near future, which will feature over on this my Stubanji page, walking everyone through what my opinion of that is after I've gotten a little bit more time with it. But I did just want to pass along my initial impressions as I've been moving things around, changing some functionality on the button boxes themselves. And I just want to say that my initial impressions are very, very strong. The modularity, the flexibility, the quality of the equipment, I think is great. All of the buttons have a really solid tactile feel to them. All the axes are really nice and smooth. They're like most VKB axes. I think they tend to be a little too stiff to my taste. They do break in over time. I just feel like sometimes they come with just a touch too much damping grease, but that's very subject to opinion. So that's not necessarily a negative, just a personal taste matter. The World War II grip's kind of interesting. I'm normally only used to larger, more modern grips that have way more hats and switches on them, so it's kind of interesting to only have essentially 2 or 3 buttons on it. But I think it'll work great for my intended purpose, which is mainly IL2, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and potentially a little DCS. So anyway, if you've been on the fence about a GNX accessory from VKB, my initial opinion is very, very strong. So I wouldn't hesitate to delay if that's something you've been on the fence about. That said, I'll look to put together a small video in the near future here highlighting that a little bit more. So anyway, that was just a hardware related element I wanted to touch on since we're a little bit light on hardware news this week. But yeah, summary, VKB NXT modules, really, really good. Okay, let's shift things over to the community news this week.
Really not track it, what they're doing exactly.
Kicking things off in the community news, we have a developer update from MATRIC. That's MATRIC. So MATRIC, if you're not familiar with them, make a button box / virtual cockpit panels. So specifically what I mean here is we're talking an iPad or Android app for your tablet. Essentially, it allows you to open it up and you can get to work designing your own little button box or virtual cockpit panel. The best thing about MATRIC is that there's already been a lot of people doing a lot of that work for you. So if you haven't checked it out, it works great. Essentially, it allows you to connect your tablet to your computer that's running DCS or essentially any other game you might want to use it for. It's very open source in that sense. It's almost like a Stream Deck. It's only limited by your creativity. But when it comes to DCS integration, up to this point, it's required a little bit of time investment messing with the export.lua file in DCS and the MATRIC integration to make all that come together in a really friendly way to make them interact properly. It was doable, but it wasn't user-friendly. So the big development this week is that through the integration of support for DCS-BIOS, that middleware via free open source app of DCS-BIOS itself allows you now to connect MATRIC to communicate with DCS in real time. What that means is anytime you switch a button or press a toggle switch or an annunciator light or indicator pops up, any change to DCS itself, you're going to see reflected back in your iPad and your Android. So I have that functionality with Helios on my touchscreen monitor and on my Stream Deck. And if that's not something you've seen before, it's a game changer when it comes to games like DCS. It really makes that home cockpit come alive in a lot of ways. and it's really, really cool. So again, that app is MATRIC, MATRIC. I've got links to this blog post as well as the software itself in the blog notes. Really, really encourage you to go check it out. They are encouraging public feedback right now since it is in beta, and they have a detailed video with step-by-step instructions on how to get that rolling. So there's also a link to the Discord page, the Hoggit post where they made this, and the MATRIC app website itself. So give it a check out. I think it'll be a really rewarding experience if you've been looking like something a nice, easy way to add an upfront controller to your home Simpit environment. You got an old iPad or Android tablet lying around. This could be for you. All right, shift over to the user content portion of this week's show.
They just blew themselves up. They just blew themselves up.
So a user over on Hoggit this week, and that is Techneatium, released a really cool Czech F-16 Gold Edition guide. So it's version 1.0, which he details not a pound for air to ground guide. So if you're not familiar with Techneatium, he is a guide developer who really released his last guide. I guess it's been almost 2 years, which kind of, where did those 2 years go? Since he last appeared on the Hoggit page to detail a release of that guide, which was for the F-14. He also has a wonderful guide for the F-18C. But this release, which was just recently, earlier this week, as I mentioned, is for the F-16. He teamed up with Gold Wolf, another user over on the Hoggit forum. We'll touch on him in just a second. But to make an F-16 guide designed primarily for air-to-air operations in the F-16, intended to sit somewhere between the quality, or not, I shouldn't say quality, apologies, but between the depth of Chuck's guide and the in-game manual. So if you're like me and you revere the quality work that Chuck's done, this isn't necessarily to take away from that. It's just designed to be a little bit more focused on what you need to know to get a system-by-system, step-by-step approach to employing the air-to-air capabilities of the F-16. So give it a look. I got the link over there. It's on the DCS user file page as well. A link to the PDF and the GitHub repository for Tech's guide is there as well. The standout features, in my opinion, is the overall just look and polish of this guide. So if you haven't used LaTeX before, they're really leveraging some high quality graphics and some nice formatting to make this guide really stand out and pop. And I've got some screenshots that I'm looking right now if you're following on the video guide. But they cover everything from basic procedures to symbology, MFD symbology, and then they have lots of hyperlinks in the guide, which I'm always a huge fan of, so you can quickly navigate from one section to the other. And probably the best part about this guide, unlike its previous ones, is it was really designed specifically to be used in the digital world. So if you got that iPad, maybe you got your iPad because you're using the MATRIC app already, good for you. You pull that up, now you're using it as a kneeboard. This will work out great for you. Also would work out pretty well in game, I imagine, through an open kneeboard application or anything like that. But always great when community members release information to make other community members successful. And that's exactly what it looks like Tech's done here. So kudos to you, sir. Thank you for all the time and effort you spent into this. Can't wait to check it out myself. As someone who tends to enjoy the air-to-ground mission more than air-to-air, I feel like generally that's because I just struggle with air-to-air missions. So you kind of tend to go with what you have more success with initially, I feel like. And to me, that's been air-to-ground. So maybe this is just the exact guide I need to get me started in air-to-air, make me a little bit more successful over there so that I'll enjoy that experience as well. Okay, but I mentioned he teamed up with a user named Goldwolf to get this guide designed, and I did want to give some props to Goldwolf while we're here in the community news section. So Goldwolf, if you haven't seen it, created this wonderful DCS beginner's guide. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are maybe you're not a beginner in DCS, but if you are, or you know those who are looking to get started in DCS, this is a wonderful resource to share with those people. It's 72 pages of incredible content about everything you need to know to get started in DCS, from which module should I buy, what equipment do I need to get started, what are the difference between all these maps, all these aircraft, who do I need to go to find tutorials, how do I get started with multiplayer? If they got any of those questions, this is the perfect guide to get them started. It's on the DCS user files page. That's Goldwolf, Goldwolf, all one word. Wonderful resource, can't recommend it enough. So just two really high quality guides from the community members helping out other community members. It's a beautiful thing. Go check it out. All right, now time for my favorite part of the show that we get to talk about each and every week, which is the Simpit Spotlight.
You don't see any big stream of flames or smoke coming out, do you?
So the Simpit Spotlight is where we highlight a community member's personal Simpit setup, no matter how simple or complex, to celebrate the joy of flying from home. And this week we have RJ Simtech's Universal Cockpit. So I found this over on the HOTAS Discord. If you're not already a member, I highly encourage you to go check it out. So much good content going over there right now, each and every week. So RJ Simtech, or I should say on the HOTAS Discord, there is a Simpit section under which you can post pictures of your wonderful setup from home. RJ Simtech did just that this week with his Universal Cockpit. And his quote is, "The idea is to make it as universal as possible for DCS jets, Star Citizen ships, and ground vehicles, racing sims, and FPS games." So if you're like RJ over there and you want to get your flying, your driving, and your FPS stuff done all in one place, boom, then this might be the setup for you. So he's got some wonderful pictures here, which I'm showcasing. He also just added, which I enjoyed, he just added a damper to his rudder pedals. He's clearly been listening to the show, RJ, since we've been talking a lot about that lately. So kudos to you, sir. But one picture I really found interesting was how he has his racing pedals mounted above his rudder pedals. So almost an interesting mounting bracket. I'm not sure if he slides those driving pedals down a little bit into place so you can drive, or maybe he can just leave them where he is and switch instantly. But if you're like RJ, you like to drive and fly from the same spot, this could be for you. Maybe I'm in the minority of simulation players. I don't do any driving sims. I'm purely flight sim only, but game recognizes game, sir, and this still looks fantastic. So really lovely setup. He's built his entire setup mainly around the Next Level Racing flight Boeing cockpit. So if you've been eyeing that, it looks like a fantastic piece of hardware. And then he's got hardware from Virpil, Winwing, MFG, Fnatic. I mean, a wide variety of hardware from different manufacturers. So he's someone like me who likes to dabble in hardware from as many developers as possible. Always great to see. So kudos to you, RJ. You get the Simpit Spotlight shown on you this week. That said, I did want to mention, for those of you who are not aware, RJ Simtech also is a community developer for hardware as well. So we haven't featured him on the show yet, but RJ Simtech is the manufacturer of the IR TrackStar, which is a wireless lightweight TrackIR alternative. So if you've ever purchased TrackIR, and I imagine that many of you probably have, you know that the default headset, if you will, I feel like piece of crap might be too strong, but yet I also feel like maybe it's just right. Let me rephrase that. It's highly susceptible to being damaged. It's just not very durable. I've gone through, over the last 10 years, maybe 2 of those myself, and I finally learned my lesson and started looking for third-party developers of TrackIR headset alternatives. And I have, in fact, purchased one from RJ Simtech. I'm actually wearing it on the headset I've got right now, even though I'm not in-game. But this TrackStar, which is the RS Ultralight, is the current version, supports both TrackIR and OpenTrack. The best part about it is it's got some extended IR lights on it, which makes, in my opinion, gives me an increased range of motion over the default TrackIR headlight or headset, excuse me. It's very lightweight, and the best part, it's wireless. That's right. If you are like me and you hate being beholden to the wires on your headset, you get up and you get yanked back down because you forgot you had it on. Yep, that happens to me. I don't know why. This might be just what you're looking for. So I've got a link to his website, his store over here. It's rjsimtech.com, where you can go check out the IR TrackStar. If you're in the market for something like that, give him a shout. I've been very happy with the product, and you might be too. So anyway, let's shift things over now to the listener feedback portion of the show.
612, departure radio check.
If you got any content for that you'd like to hear featured on the show, or if there's something you want to have a Simpit Spotlight shown on, some aspect of the flights community I haven't mentioned yet, please let me know about it. I always enjoy hearing from people in the community, people like you. You can follow, or excuse me, you can contact the show via email at feedback@thehangarbaypod.com, or you can leave me a voice message on the show's page on Spotify. You can also contact the show, any of the social media platforms where the show is currently based, which is Instagram @thehangarbaypod, or over on Twitter @thehangarbaypod. Also mention that all the YouTube episodes are posted over on my YouTube page @Stumanji. You can find the shows there, leave comments, like, subscribe, or finally, you can also find the show on Facebook if you wish. But as I mentioned, feel free to put out some content recommendations on stuff you'd like to hear, and I'll be sure to talk about it or potentially even finish it in a feature in a video. That said, that wraps things up for the week of February 17th. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Hangar Bay. We'll be back next Saturday to get you squared away with all the latest military flight simulation and hardware news. But until then, think about what you put out into the community and make it a better place. Fly safe, everyone.
Right yet. Let's go down low on the deck. Unload 500 knots. Let's get out of here.
The missile knows where it is at all times. Oh, I'm sorry. What I meant to say is that you can find the video show on YouTube or on Spotify at the Hangar Bay Pod. The audio show is available on all major podcast providers. You can contact the show via email, feedback@thehangarbaypod.com, or on Instagram and Twitter @thehangarbaypod. Show notes and links to everything discussed on this week's show are available at thehangarbaypod.com.